If you see me over there not singing, it's because I just love to sit and soak. I just love to sit and soak. That was just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Awesome. So my wife, Kim, doesn't want to be a co-speaker, but she will be. But this is our deal. I'll let her kind of pretend she's not going to be. But we'll be sharing, and as we go, she'll be sharing more and more as we go. We have Kim and I have 14 children, and we have a picture there. There's the gang. So the whole tribe, yep, on the farm. We don't live on a farm. That's my dad's farm. But anyway, you're going to get to see lots of them because throughout the week they're going to be popping in and sharing a little bit as part of what, sharing their perspectives and all, so that you'll get to see a lot of them. We are not experts. I'm sure many of you here could be up here leading, so much wisdom and knowledge, and we are not experts, but we'll try to encourage and also give, depending on time, we'll give some chance for you guys to do some sharing also. We're available to talk anytime, though. You need any encouragement or just want to talk, we're available to talk anytime except my nap time. All right, so I'm turning 61 next week, so I got to have my nap time. So yes. All right, so we planted a church in New Hope, Pennsylvania, about 22 years ago, and we're still there by God's grace. We're still there. It is beautiful, but it's not a beautiful spiritual place. It's actually a very, very challenging spiritual place. It's a very crazy place. We're the only Bible-believing, gospel-preaching church in that area, and it's unbelievable. And it's 20 years ahead of the rest of the country. That's what I tell everybody. What you're seeing in our country now, Christians hated, churches attacked, all this craziness and rioting and all that. We saw that 20 years ago when we started. For the first 3 months, we had to have policemen in our services because they didn't want us to stay. They called me up, said, what do you believe about X, Y, and Z? And I gave them the biblical answers, not politically correct, but biblically correct. And they just came after us hard. It was crazy. We had police for 3 months. The radicals tried to keep us out. They threatened, they attacked, they came into the church, tried to disrupt. Everything you're seeing now, we saw 20 years ago. And it's known, it was when we first went there, it was known as the witchcraft capital of the East Coast. It's no longer, I don't know what exactly happened, but maybe we had something to do with that, but it's moved on, it's no longer that, but it still is known as the Sodom and Gomorrah of the East Coast, of Pennsylvania. It's known very well for that, the Sodom and Gomorrah, and so it's a good thing we were homeschooling. It's a good thing we ended up homeschooling because we typically homeschool throughout elementary school, into middle school, and then at some point we tried to transition them into high school or into public school, and then to try to help them battle through that and get ready for college. But that's just what we've done in the past. Although that is no longer an option. We are no longer able to do that. We did that for the first 9, but the next group, we're not going to be able to do that. We can't leave them in the school anymore, and we're going to share more and more of the stories of what we're going through. Once again, you're seeing a lot in the news, but we've been dealing with this for 20 years, and now they've gone, wait, what we're experiencing now, you are all going to experience, and wait till you hear it. It's craziness. But let's start with prayer. Father, we thank you for the worship. We thank you for every person who's here. We know we're here for a reason. Your Holy Spirit has led us here together to encourage each other, Lord, to build each other up, and to maybe some of us feel like quitting or tired, or we just we're struggling, and maybe we're discouraged. Whatever it is, Lord, we just pray that your Holy Spirit would encourage us and strengthen us and help us to keep taking that next step of faith. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so I titled this Kicking and Screaming, because George was right. We never thought we'd ever homeschool. Only those crazy people did that, although George was a great guy. He is a great guy. But we just couldn't imagine homeschooling, because that's, back then, 23 years ago, only the really radical people did that, right? But it was forced, we never even considered it, but it was forced upon us. Our oldest son was in 3rd grade. We had 2 kids in school at that time. One was in 3rd grade, one was in 1st grade. And he was exposed to some crazy things in school, and it was really damaged by that. It was just a terrible time. If we had called 60 Minutes, we could have been on 60 Minutes. It was that crazy. And a lot of it was centered around pornography. And now, today, that's no big deal, right? 3rd graders, they're shoving it down their throats, But then this was a shocking thing that this group of kids in the school were exposed, probably an older brother, something crazy. But it really damaged him because pornography is demonic. It's a demonic doorway. It's not, boy, if you struggle on your phone, smash it. If you struggle with your computer, unplug it. Whatever it takes to stay away from pornography, it is demonic. I prayed over a number of people and seen it manifest, the demonic spirits with pornography. It's very, very, very serious. There's a reason why they call it sex addiction and all this stuff, and why it's so powerful, why we see these crazy things in the news now. It's because, so we experienced that, and the school would not work with us. They just tried to protect themselves. What a shock. Then they thought we were crazy. I remember they gave us a cold shoulder. They were crazy. They gave us a cold shoulder. So we finally had no choice. We finally had to pull our kids out of school. And then everybody thought we were crazy. Everybody we knew, our parents, families, everybody, you're crazy, And we were crazy. And it's a good thing we did it because 6 months later, that's when we started the church in New Hope, and there's no way we're going to send our kids to that elementary school. I'll be telling you lots of stories as we go. Kim will be too. It's a good thing we did. But we saw the advantages immediately because we had started out with public school. We saw the advantages immediately. We got to invest in our kids. I remember when they went to kindergarten. Remember that? You want to come up and say anything? Yeah. Well, I'm going to force her up here in a minute. But anyway, she's tired. 14 kids. She's tired. But anyway, I'm the tired one. But anyway, kindergarten, you have them all day, and all of a sudden they go to kindergarten, they disappear for the day, right? And it was like really strange for us. And before we put them in kindergarten, we had so much time with them, and then we hardly saw them. And we realized 5 is way too young to hand off our kids to a stranger. Right? And put them under their authority. It just was way too young. We started really struggling with that because raising kids is our job. It's our job. Deuteronomy, God has given these children to us, not to put them in a daycare or a public school or something like that where we, unless it's just Christian schools, that's another positive option. But you don't know what you're going to get in a public school. Wait till you hear our stories. You're going to be in shock unless you watch the news. But God has given us this job. In Deuteronomy 6:4, it says, "Hear, O Israel." I think we got it up here. Yeah. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." I'm going to make sure I got the right version here. Yeah, okay. "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give to you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children." Are we impressing our kids? Are we impressing our kids, right? "Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and at your gates." And that's what we're called to do. And we can't do this in 1 hour after school, right? We can't do that. It's impossible. I know I grew up on a farm, and I was always with my mom and dad, and we were constantly, being impressed in more ways than one on the farm. We misbehaved. Well, I'm not going to get into the milking hose stories. But anyway, we are impressed. We are impressed. So Kim and I, though, were dragged kicking and screaming into homeschooling. It was just crazy. But isn't that how God often works? Isn't that how he often works? He calls us to do what we think is impossible, to accomplish his purpose in our lives, and to keep us dependent on his power. God often calls us to do something crazy, to the world crazy, crazy in our minds, impossible in our minds. He calls us to do that. You ever been called to do something crazy? Homeschooling is probably one of those things, right? Something impossible that God put in our life to make us dependent on him. That's how God works. I know when we were, I was a youth pastor for 10 years before I did evangelism and revival ministry, and then I did church planting, a couple churches. So before that, I was a youth pastor, and we were in Connecticut, Bridgeport, Connecticut, and there was a Christian school that had a van load of kids they brought from the inner city. It was a really rough area, very, very rough. In fact, the kids that we picked up they called it their ghetto. That's what they called it. I didn't call it anything, but they called it their ghetto. And they got so rough that they finally bulldozed it and knocked it down. It was just out of control. When the stuff that we saw, this was 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago now, people just carrying guns out in the open. It was just beyond comprehension. But God, this Christian school said, hey, would you take this van load of kids and minister to them, because we had a gym and everything. And I said, yeah, we'll do it, And next thing you know, we had a van load, then we had 2 van loads, and then we had 3 van loads, and then we had 3 vans and a bus. We had 150 kids we were picking up. We would go down into the inner city, and these kids would just swarm on. And I'd say, well, did you ask your mom? I don't know where she is. I said, okay, all right. These kids were just piling on the bus. We were taking them away for 3 or 4 hours, bringing them back. It was a different world. We had 70 kids on this old Greyhound bus that we had. They were up in the racks and everything. It's a different world. And they had so much fun. It was crazy. But it's crazy that God called me and Kim, called us to do this, because I didn't know anything about the inner city. I grew up on a farm. I know cows. Moo. I don't know anything about inner city. It was scary to me. If I saw a stoplight, I locked my doors, I grew up on a farm, And I'm like, God, you got the wrong guy. I just don't think, but he just kept putting it on our heart, and we did it, and it started exploding. It was crazy. I remember going down we started doing, we'd pick them up every week, do this big ministry at the gym, 150 kids. It was an insane time. You couldn't imagine what it was like, right? But then we started doing basketball on the weekends, on the weekends, and I'd go pick up a van load of kids to play basketball on a Saturday, and I remember driving down there, and I pulled up for the kids, and I'm waiting for them to come and get in the van, and I had one of my assistants with me who grew up in a gang. Even though it was a suburb, he grew up in a gang. He knew drugs and all that. And we got out, and I'm waiting for the kids to come, and one of the kids forgot his sneakers. I said, okay, go get it, and he ran up and got his sneakers, and while I'm waiting for him, I see another little kid over here, and I already had a van load of boys, and I saw another kid, and I'm like, well, maybe he'll want to come. And he was looking at me kind of funny, and I'm like smiling at him, and I'm waving at him, and my assistant said, what are you doing? And I go, well, there's a kid, maybe he's going to want to come play basketball with us. He goes, don't look at him. I go, why? He goes, look behind him. And I looked behind him, and there's a couple real big guys behind him, really not smiling and not waving. They were like glaring, and I'm like, what's going on? He goes, that kid is a lookout for a drug deal going on right behind them. Those are the drug deal, and they're trying to, and I go, what are they going to do? And they go, they're trying to figure out, are you an undercover cop or are you just stupid? And I said, tell him I'm stupid. And one of the dads leaned out of the window who were picking up the kids, gave them some kind of signal, I don't know, and saved my life, stupid's life. But we didn't know what we were doing. I drove down for mischief night. I remember that Wednesday night was the prayer group, youth group, and I would pick up the kids. We'd have different people picking up on one night. Nobody would pick them up. It was mischief night. Now, where I grew up, mischief night, you'd put some soap on somebody's window, That was mischief night. What do I know? Moo, right? So, but, tip over a cow or two. That's what you do, But I go down there, and it was crazy. It was crazy. I'm driving down, and it was like a war zone. We're driving through a war zone, and I dropped the kids off, and I'm coming back, and I remember coming down the main street of Bridgeport, and I came up to a stoplight, and I'm looking, and the road looked like there was ice all over the road. I'm like, what is going on? What's on the road? And I finally realized it was broken glass. It looked like ice just all down the entire road. I pull up to a stoplight, and there's a policeman at the other corner just sitting there watching. I pull up to the stoplight, and as soon as he did bottles and everything started smashing into the van, it was crazy. I'm like, wow, what? And I looked over at the policeman, and he gave me a look like, if you're stupid enough to stop, you deserve it, So I'm like, and I just hit the gas and went through every red light the whole way home. They didn't stop me. They didn't care. I didn't know what I was doing, but we started to see some crazy things. We started to see kids' lives change. And I remember the first kid who finally accepted Christ out of this mob. He accepted Christ. His name was Juan, and he accepted Christ, but he wanted to come to Sunday school. And I said, well, I don't know if you're going to fit in our Sunday school, you know. And so I said, tell you what, I'm going to have breakfast club for you. Kim bought us some bagels and stuff, and we had a house right on the edge of the parking lot right across from the church there. And I said, come on over and I'll do breakfast with you on Sunday mornings, and someday we'll graduate you to the other boring Sunday school, I told him, right? So he comes over, and he loved it, and he accepted Christ, and I was so excited. He says, I want to bring a friend next week. I said, yeah, bring him, you know. And so the next week he brought a friend. His name was Rick. And he goes, Rick wants to become a Christian too. I told him all about it. I said, that's great, Rick. And so prayed with Rick. He accepted Christ, and these guys ended up growing, and it was just a wild, wild story about their lives. So he accepted Christ too, and we had this. I'm like, wow. I was like, Kim, we did this great breakfast, 2 kids saved, you know. And so the next day I went out to my car, and I saw another car sitting not too far from my car, and I said, that's strange. And I walked up and I looked in, and there was all these rotting groceries in the back seat. I'm like, what? And then I looked in and I saw that somebody had broken into this car, and they had the ignition yanked out and hot wired and all that stuff. And I'm like, whoa, crime has come. We lived in Trumbull. We lived in the suburbs right over the line from Bridgeport. I'm like, whoa, crime has come to Trumbull. And I locked the doors, and it was like scary. And that Wednesday I went up to the youth group. I said, everybody be careful. That we called the police. They came. Yeah, it was stolen down at Bridgeport on Sunday morning sometime, and I announced, guys, be careful, because you got to be really careful, because there's a stolen car in the driveway in the parking lot of the church. You got to watch out, lock your cars, be careful, crime is here, and the whole thing. I was, got everybody being careful. And so that after youth group, Juan and Rick came up to me and said, Pastor Chuck, we just feel like we need to tell you something. You don't have to be afraid. We stole that car. I'm like, why? He goes, we had no way to get to your Sunday school, so we stole the car to get there. I'm like, guys, I will pick you up. No more car stealing. And they did. That was their last car they stole. That was good. So that was what it was like. But God, doesn't he do that? He calls us to do something crazy that's way outside of our comfort zone, like homeschooling, right? He calls us to do that. We see that all over the Bible. What are examples in the Bible? We see people called to do something crazy. Daniel. Go pet the kitties. What's that? Jonah, yeah. Yeah, he didn't listen though. What? Moses, yes, Moses. Esther. Hosea. Isaiah. You get the point. All over the Bible, right? It's everywhere. And one of my favorite stories is in Joshua, because Joshua is called to do some really crazy things. In the book of Joshua, Joshua has replaced Moses. God has used him to replace him. And in Joshua 1, verse 10 and 11, listen to what the very first job that Joshua is given to do is something really, really crazy. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your supplies ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here and go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. For your own. He was called to cross the Jordan River. And you can imagine Joshua. God, we're off to a bad start. I just replaced Moses. And my very first command is last one in's a rotten egg, right? He's got to march through the Jordan River. How about a bridge? How about a boat? How about lots of boats, right? How about that? Imagine this is how crazy it was. Imagine the president today saying, okay, we're going to go over and help the Ukraine. We're going to save the Ukraine from Russia. So I want to get the army ready, and we're going to march over to, let's see, which direction is that? The shortest distance. West Coast, right? Well, anyway, one or the other. What's that? Straight, okay, march to there, all right, and much better at geography than I am. All right, but anyway, march to the ocean. President Biden says, we're going to march to the ocean, and when you get there, now just keep marching, guys, just keep marching. Can you imagine that? Don't answer that. But anyway. And God picked the best time. He picked the best time. It was the flood stage. And the worst part of this is it's not going to part until they actually touched the water with their toes. Moses got to do what? Raise his rod. Right? You know, they all walk through. But help me. Joshua. I have a son named Joshua. Not Joshua. No. He's got to wait till they touch their toes hit the water. In fact, I'm going to read it to you. Joshua chapter 3, verse 15, where it says, now the Jordan is at flood stage all during the harvest. God picked the flood stage. He could have picked it when it was shallow. No, the flood stage. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. Verse 17, the priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. This was a step of faith, right? This is a step of faith. Anybody here take steps of faith? And not just a step of faith, but walking by faith, living by faith. These priests had to stand in the middle. Well, all these, the whole Israelite group passed through. They had to stand in the middle, and any time that could have come in and got them. It could have been a tsunami any time, right? You know, and so they're waiting, and that is living by faith. And God often puts us in a place, especially homeschoolers. He puts us in a place where we have to take a step of faith, and then we have to keep living by faith because everything is against us, right? Everything. Look what they say about homeschoolers now. It's getting worse and worse because they can't control us, because they can't brainwash us. And they're getting vicious about it. They're calling us all kinds of things. Just, I don't know if you follow it, but a lot of vicious things. But God has called us to do this, to take that step of faith and to keep walking by faith, no matter how hard it gets. It's not hard for anybody here, probably, but you might know somebody who's had a hard time homeschooling their children. Might have got a little bit tired. Right? You ever get tired? She thought she was done. I'm going to tell you why. But thought we were done. The 12-year-old. Tell me. You thought you were done, and then you got Laurel. Right? Kim thought she was done. Yeah, she's going to share a lot as we go. But come on. Yeah. So she thinks she's done, and what do you keep saying now? I'm so tired. Because the 12-year-old coming up the ladder, and all of a sudden you got a younger one, which you're going to hear the whole story in the next few days.
No, what I wanted to say about this is probably more me kicking and screaming than you kicking and screaming. I was a teacher. I went to school to be a teacher. I have an elementary education degree, and I was never going to homeschool my kids, like never. And I just had my sixth, Sarah. She was a newborn. She was like 3 months old, and we had all these issues with Ryan in third grade. And at that time, we had no finances to send him to a private school, so the only option was to homeschool. And I just remember, I was like, oh, God. I mean, you're just smacking me across the head. I knew in my heart someday I was going to homeschool my kids, but I always dug my heels in. I was stubborn. I didn't want to do it. And he took a very serious situation to drag me through the mud to do it, and that was 1999, so we've been homeschooling since 1999. And there's the goods and the bads and the uglies, but it's been, I think, overall, for our family, we're a pastor's family. When most families are off, we're not. We're working. Holidays, we're working. So it gave us a chance to be together as a family, have dinner together, be together at lunchtime, like be able to do things in the day that we would not have been able to do if the kids were all in school. So I'm very thankful that we did have that time and that I finally submitted and went that road. But you will hear from my kids at points during the week, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they can
give you the good, the bad, and the ugly.
The real story.
They were telling some stories on the way up here. I'm like, please don't tell that story.
Yeah, but it's fun, right? Like, that's what makes it what it is, right? So that's kind of my story. I don't really want to talk about.
Okay.
Talk about
yeah, we're going to hit the rest.
We'll talk about the second phase.
Yeah, we're going to do. She's going to be sharing a lot more as we go because you'll see why. There's a lot more to this story, but I'm just kind of giving you the introduction today. But God calls us to take a step of faith. Like intermission, doing the inner city ministry. And then he calls us to keep living by faith and teach us to be really dependent and live by faith with whatever. I'll just use one more story from what we did with the inner city. Is one time I was just, when I really learned what it really meant to live by faith and to completely be dependent, I had a guy who would take the kids home on Wednesday night with the van. He drove the kids home on Wednesday night with the van. There was the teenagers. And one time something happened. He couldn't do it. He said, Chuck, I can't drive the van. Could you do it? I said, okay. I grabbed one of the other youth leaders, and I said, Joe was his name. I said, Joe, come on, ride shotgun for me. We're going to take the guys back down to back home. And now this is at night, later at night, and it's a little scarier down there. And so we start driving down, and I get in the van, and I'm about halfway there, and I realize there's no gas in the van. You know how they do that, church. The youth pastor's always got to fill the gas, right? Fill the van. And I'm like, oh, no. And I got this van load of boys and kids, and mostly boys. I think there are a couple of girls. And I said, guys, we're out of gas. You can't run out of gas, they say to me. Like, I don't know that, I'm like, oh, like they were scared. How do you think I was going to survive this, right? If these guys are afraid, we can't run out of gas. And they live there, right? I go, I know. So I said, guys, we got to find some money. And so they all start looking, and, Joe says, come on, look, guys. And I said, look under the seats. Look, church van. They start looking. They said, I got a quarter. I got a nickel. I got a penny. They start finding coins everywhere. And they start adding it up. And just as we almost get into Bridgeport there, where they live, and there's one gas station, just one open at this time. One. And it's like Fort Knox. It's that kind of a gas station, It is, they're behind, the bars and everything like that, and they have a speaker, they're talking through it, and so I'm like, I know I got one chance at gas. It's right at the edge of the village where they live. They call it Father Panic Village was the name of it. And I go, what do we got, guys? I ate up as 98 cents. I'm like, oh, okay, we can do this. Back then, I know now that would only get you about 100 yards, but back then, that would have got me home. And so I went up to the window. I said, oh, whew, I'm so glad I made it. The lady's looking at me like, who's this crazy? What are you doing here? Right? I go, here, I need 98 cents of gas. I'm out. I need 98 cents. She looks at me, said, pointed down. I looked down and it said minimum $1. I said, oh, I know, but all I have is 98 cents. Look at these guys who are like doing this in the van windows, And I go, we got to get them home. They live in Father Panic Village, And I don't have any gas. I'm on E, below E. She goes, I go, I know, but 98 cents. Can't you give me 2 cents? She goes, leave right now or I'll call the police. I'm like, whoa, look at me. I can't go in there and run out of gas. Look at me, have mercy. She goes, I'm calling the police right now. I'm like, oh, great. Now I'm going to be in jail, And so I go, all right, guys, start praying. And they start praying, and I'm like, God, please. I just remember, like, God, please, help us to get there and get these guys safely and help us to get home. And we're just all praying, please, God, please. And I go, guys, I'm not going to stop completely. I'm going to slow down. You guys bail out, And I barely stopped. They all jumped out, and I gunned it and took off, and we're coming home, and the whole time I'm just praying, God, please. You ever been at that place where you're just like, God, please help me. One more turn of the wheel, one more step, you know what I'm talking about? One more day of homeschooling, yeah. How many days do we have to do? Unless you're in Jersey, you can do whatever you want. All right, so the Pennsylvania, the Nazis still run it. But anyway, so we're like, please, and we finally crossed the Bridgeport line into Trumbull, into the suburbs, and I'm like, safe, and the car was still moving, and I said, Joe, we're going to live. We're not going to die, I was serious. I was really serious. I go, we're not going to die. We're going to live, Joe, for another day. And he goes, oh, that's nice. Why don't we stop and get something to eat? There's a diner there. I go, with what, 98 cents, What are we going to do? He goes, oh, no, I got money. what are you talking about? He goes, well, did you see what just happened? He goes, well, I didn't want to waste my money because then we couldn't stop and get something to eat, you know? I go, Joe, dead men don't eat, Joe. They don't eat. You can't eat if you're dead. I go, we're not stopping, Joe. But I learned what it meant to be dependent. I never forgot that. I never forgot it. What crazy steps has God called you to take? How has homeschooling been your step of faith? How has it been a step of faith? How did God lead you? Kicking and screaming, like us, kicking and screaming. What crazy steps? What did you have to overcome? What did you have to overcome, and what has been the outcome of that? How has He worked in your life? And that was kind of just like to break the ice, and then we're going to get into we're going to take steps as we go. But how has God been working in your life? And I hope after the next few days, you're going to be encouraged. You're going to be, wherever you're at, I hope it gives you the mercy and grace to take that next step. Do you want to add something to what I said? That's good. What? Go ahead, say. You want to say something? There's nothing? Okay. She's going to be sharing a lot. Trust me. I got it all lined up. A lot of stories. I got it lined up. But can you think of anything else that I should say about it? No? Maybe someone just, because I got a few minutes here, anybody else just stand up and say how God has led you on a crazy step of faith with homeschooling. Just pop up and give a minute. Anybody? I don't know what kind of crowd we have here, but I was trying to leave time for that if someone wanted to say something. Anybody else crazy step? No, you're all like Kim. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Just go ahead. There you go.
No one was doing it then. No one was doing it then.
Yeah.
And I had a 4-year-old and two little ones, and the 4-year-old was very smart, but she was honestly bossing me all day. I could not wait to get her in kindergarten. I was like counting the days. And then on Focus on the Family, they had a show about homeschooling, and I want to say the last name was Moore, Dr. Moore. Did you ever read those books? Yeah. And I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. No one would do this, I cannot wait to get her, because she just bosses me all day, and she's just very, outgoing and stuff. Anyway, so then the Lord started working on me. And I thought, I need to pray about this. And the more I prayed, I thought, I'm going to need to homeschool. The Lord's calling me to homeschool after hearing this show on the radio. And so we ended up with 5 kids, homeschooled them, kind of like you did, up until, they got into high school. But, and it's been a good, and Cindy's one of them. And some of them, you'll meet some of the other ones too. Evelyn's here too. But anyway, that's how we did.
Okay, great. Thank you.